Hello everyone, other question and answer video today, this time a bit different from the usual because I fished this from a Reddit discussion about my channel, which I found quite interesting. As we will see now, I will criticize it in a way that will partly address the issue. It's an interesting discussion because it's objective from one side, but it also highlights a certain way of thinking regarding history in general, not just about YouTube channels. And I'm the first one, in fact, to be critical regarding the quality, the historical quality of the same, the fact that I'm the first one to be traumatically critical of the practically non-existent quality of historical content on YouTube, but also fair enough about the fact that, and I've been very vocal about this multiple times, that the videos I make here is not the way I write scientific works, and it's legitimate to wonder then what are the differences, what I'm doing here, why I do it for, but also whether there is any overall importance, right, for all this, not just YouTube, but also internet, say, production, right, of historical content, and or the ability of getting information from the internet in general, even sometimes from the same scientific publications and so on. The other thing I want to say is that, of course, I will be critical myself in this video, so if this episode will get posted on the Reddit discussion, that I am not intention to participate in there at any time. Of course, bear in mind that I'm doing this for the followers, right? And so for people that are also on Reddit, but that I'm not going to engage in that specific debate unless I see it fit, but still from YouTube, right? And I will exemplify in this video how I work, right? Answering the the perplexities, the doubts, the suspicion that are, as you will see, emerging from the discussion, and I'm interested in it because it also allows me to pave the way for some sort of broader criticism to specific YouTube content, right? Because in the last couple of months, I acquired some sort of broader awareness. The historically themed content that is uploaded on YouTube, and as you know, I don't really follow any other content or channel, but every once in a while, given that after all the YouTube enticement, let's say, manages to make me click, for curiosity, just to say, and this is mostly the question that I pose myself, how the hell can they explain something like of enormous importance and or sometimes of complete moral and scientific controversy, at least because they mostly want people, in fact, to click on it through the thumbnail, the title, etc., to say, well, whether is this for real, and how do they even make it, right? And initially, my point was they're surely going to be, given that these are all scripted videos, while mine are not, evidently, like maybe they make such an enormous work, right, of polishment, of refinement, and whatever, that they would come up with the best information in the best and most articulated fashion as possible. But sadly enough, it's not like this at all. It's an incredibly raw, unrefined, unpolished, relativistic, say, presentation of certain historical topics that I loathe for the way it's presented, right? Surely there are good channels out there, but I still have to find them, right? And or at least I've never found a YouTube history channel that is that extensive and intensive to be actually competent, accurate, and satisfactory, and broadly and morally and scientifically challenging, right? As at least the way I try to be, which is, not to say that I succeed in that, but I'm also aware of the quality of my work, and I will talk all about this, always pointing out that, of course, I realize, because if I were in this sense, like the first response I will give, of course, is that is Schwerpunkt an authentic source? Well, what do you even mean by that? Because first of all, say all these history channels out there are there for entertainment. I'm here at least to get people interested, given the breadth and the actual quality of the content. That doesn't mean that it's easily accessible or understandable, but that surely will leave them with actual information that they can spend, in my opinion, quantitatively and qualitatively much better than, again, any other channel that I've seen, if they are interested in actually learning history, which is what I'm here for at the same time, because in order to make this video, I actually learn the stuff. And a bit of the discussion emerging from Reddit is all about this. That is to say, how do I trust Schwerpunkt to be, I would say, a reliable and or accurate source? I don't like the term authentic, at least in this case. What is because this is the title of the discussion. Is Schwerpunkt an authentic source? And to me, an authentic source should be, at least in a very narrowly and rigidly formal way, what you would use in a scientific paper that is going to be peer-reviewed, and so that is going to pass through the most intense level of academic selection in order to be out there. And it's obvious enough, and that's what surprises me, because I found a bit not quite the same point that is say touched on by this discussion, but a bit the same attitude that I will explain later regarding what someone is doing on YouTube in the first place, right? And the interesting question is also, why would somebody think that, if that's the meaning you give to an authentic source, are you even asking whether YouTube is one or not? That's very curious to me, as, yes, an actual historian and an actual PhD. It's not what I'm here to demonstrate you, other than the actual historical information that I provide. And it's a bit of a challenge. That is to say, if you manage to prove me wrong, which is what apparently many people are after whenever they legitimately want to also learn history themselves, right? How to criticize something, whether to know whether something is reliable or not. It's something that happens normally when you're in your early 20s, right? You want to find the actual spring, and then you're also at that point more subject to the charm, right, of whoever speaks to you without having much experience, much background. And so I totally understand the point of this discussion, and I don't want to come off as, haughty or, arrogant, whatever. But that also at least for those who follow me, that my persona is pretty elitistic in general. And that's the entire point why I make all this stuff on YouTube in the first place, because I really want to show at least what is possible to do. And again, if those who watch this do not have the tools to understand whether this is actually qualitative history content or not, it's not my problem, right? I'm not here because there is a law that says that I have to be like this. Not even when you're actually talking about somebody else's work, right? Meaning that, at least in the way I work here, which is, if I were to quote single passages, and I do, and I actually do cite sources and scholars, right? So the way the discussion developed, in this sense, I didn't appreciate it very much, because it's as if, I didn't do that. But, when you talk about very big topics, and you have a substantial experience, and you're a YouTuber, and you would have to cite, so many different scholars, rather than so many different sources at that point even, meant as not necessarily as primary ones, but it's just something more that would transform, in fact, this content in a way that probably nobody would watch it in the first place. And I will explain why, because there is also apparently this idea that you could do it, and you really can't, right? This is not about getting views, which I don't really care primarily about. This is literally how you should make the content in the first place, which would turn out like, I would like I would do an article which take 3 months to write, and given that I have uploaded 1,800 videos, it's obviously, there you have the answer, but also you understand that if I'm doing both, and I decide, say, in fact, that they're both worth it evenly, this is the point I would like to attract attention on. You should understand why I'm doing this, which is, at the end of the day, why I'm responding to this, because it's not that I care very much about the opinion of whoever is involved there, just per se, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't be here speaking in the first place. So the thing goes like this: is Schwerpunkt an authentic source, right? And so he says, hello, I have... by the way, this is supposed to be posted... I will not make any reference to names, nor to assuming the background of these people. I had some idea, but I already forgot about how they were named or whatever. So I don't want to be biased in any way, but always remember that I am that kind of person that always looks at that, because not just I am... professionally trained to, in fact, look at sources, just like you apparently are questioning here, but I may be doing it a bit beyond what is the norm, and it's just my character, right? It's just a trait of my personality, at least, and I can't avoid doing that, so I will deal with this just with the straight text and content. So he says, hello, I have a question about a YouTube channel. The channel's name is Schwerpunkt, and there follows the link, and he has a massive library of lectures about rarely talked about subjects on YouTube, such as the barbarian invasion, Kingdom of Lotharingia, Burgundians, Frisians, and more. I don't think I ever made a video about the Frisians specifically, but anyway, he claims to have a PhD. However, all of his videos are unsourced. Oh no! And the description only links to his other videos. I want to ask if he is a trustable source. You all know was inserted by me, just to add a bit of comedy to it. So the question is important, because there is an actual answer by what I think is supposed to be a historian, and so at that point, I don't know whether you are, right, given that here it's put into question whether not just I'm a PhD, but whether I'm a historian even, right? So at least there is some counter argument there, because they claim that they have some of that background, seemingly, and that's something that I think we should all be trained to do. Like, we should be able to rely on our own capacity, in fact, to discern. And that's where I get suspicious again, because the final question is, I want to ask if he's a trustable source. And here you open a universe of possibilities, because again, as I was saying in the beginning, what does it even mean, right? That you want, or you may think, you may ask, what I can be quoted, is this what makes me a trustable? That you would, if somebody told you, yes, this is a trustable source, what would you do? Do you cite my content? If the actual meaning of the question is instead, is this guy just talking BS, right? And should I watch him at all? This is a completely different issue, of course. And there is a bit of both, because at least the guy acknowledges the amount of material and also the relative, relative preciousness of the topics that are very, by the way, sort of migration era, early medieval biased. That is to say, this is a disturbing trend I got from my content that I'm always vocal about, because YouTube ads specifically give more money on the basis of sort of ethnic migration era content. So if I read here, barbarian invasion, Kingdom of Lotharingia, Burgundians, Frisians, and more, well, what about, I don't know, the late Middle Ages? What about tactical analysis, which is what I actually specialize in for a living? What about, I don't know, modern warfare that I really uploaded a lot about? What about, I don't know, this is just about more or less Germanic stuff, right? And this is unfortunately the case. Just yesterday I uploaded, I don't know, I will not make examples now, but the disproportion between let's say, certain types of, engagement in certain topics rather than others, that I have gotten from, again, now 5 years of YouTube, analytics experience, is that I can speak about really a lot about actually much more rarely talked subjects, right? The barbarian invasion, the kingdom of Lotharingia, Burgundians and Frisians, there's plenty of stuff up, right? And oracle stuff that people watch enormously. Again, I will not make specific examples also in the topic that I actually specialize in time and place, right? But what about that? Why do people don't watch that, don't think it's valuable in that regard? And why is there already this sort of... Because that's the first thing I see as a historian, right? The list of these topics, and so what this person got interested in, right? Just to make the point, I have nothing against this person specifically for having posed the question or whatever, but this is just what for example, I would be here to talk to you about, right? Why is there such bias statistically? And I have a lot to say about that. I admittedly don't talk so much about it on Schwerpunkt, because at the end of the day, my thought is that the more people I get into this, and also the more they're gonna get acquainted in the other topics that nobody really thinks of so thoroughly, right? So there's plenty of people that enjoy the other type of content, but again, there is still a clear disproportion there, and it's a very interesting historical, political, sociological, moral, and scientific issue to analyze that I honestly don't find discussed pretty much anywhere. Right, I often Google the stuff, seeing if there is anything open source about it, and actually the experience that I matured personally about these topics is considerable, and what appears to be extremely clear to me doesn't seem to have dawned, or at least on those who should be talking about these things preferentially, and or has made it out there. Maybe actually out of bias for some reason, and I plan to expand more in that direction. Even though history is more interesting, it's funnier. Let's be honest about that. All right. So again, the point is, am I reliable even if I don't put sources out here? So as I was saying, I'm tempted to explain now, but I think it's better to do it at the end of the video. So, by the way, that's how I work, right? That's another thing you have to be prepared for in any circumstance. Like, if I go to a professor that I haven't read the work of till the very last comma he has written, and I ask him something that I don't know, is that this person can be, of course, polite and explain to me, but if he wanted to be really a a-hole, he would say, go read my work, right? And don't make me waste time, right? So the idea is that I could do this too, right? You should be aware, given that I've posted so much, to be able to evaluate me on the base of that. That is not the quantity per se, but on the base of the entirety and how much this goes beyond history as well. What is that I'm there for specifically? The fact that just at a first glance you could tell by the limits set by the title and the depth in which I explored that specific subject, that these videos are very, in fact, specific in the way they are laid out, right? If somebody makes a video, in fact, about, I don't know, the barbarian invasions or the freezing, it's normally, again, the YouTube average there will be an incredibly cheap, unrefined, superficial, Wikipedia-style A-Bs, but even less, right? Even Wikipedia is actually more complex than what most, YouTube history videos really are, right? So let's pass to the answer from this. I will. This is the point. You're here. The discussion doesn't revolve much around the fact of whether I'm a historian or not, but whether I make good history on the channel. So I actually will think that this person is a historian as well, but I also always analyze everything that I just see on the same way. I think I would analyze my own content if I were to follow it. By the way, I would never watch my own content, telling the truth. Perhaps because I'm the one who makes it, but let's say in general, I'm not much of a follower, as you know, by nature. So there is a disclaimer at the beginning regarding the reliability of sources to be cited in proper historiographical works that leads to other Reddit discussions. So I will skip this because I presume that they get it right. They tell you what is that you should be quoting in order to eventually publish that bibliography, that cytography, or whatever. I have made actually a lot of videos talking about this from my work. There is, especially in the Terrain playlist, a lot about my method, philosophy of history, like how I made my research. I have a series going on my doctorate, how I worked at the time. And more, like how do you write an article, whatever, how do you recognize whether something good or not. I made some book reviews, so you can see more or less how I approach things, always bearing in mind that I'm not there to make the content on how you should actually go step by step as if I were your tutor, right? Actually, I do so, but in a more conceptual and actually deeper sense, because I made that specific content to explain to people what, beside the technical way, science, etc., you should be aware of that really nobody tells you before you get into such things. And of course that varies incredibly from student to student, and I am discussing essentially history or historical work, and I make other considerations on other subjects, etc., but it's all confined to history. So bypassing that disclaimer, so the historian, reviews my channel, says, after looking through his video collection, which is extremely huge, there are already several things that caught my eye. First, as you said, his videos are unsourced. That's a big no-no. This is what he says. And in that regard, not even remotely comparable to proper, in brackets, academic publications, be it as monographies or essays, right? So, again, I don't know the whole background either of this section, right, and what is that they actually discuss. I could actually open it again. Well, it doesn't matter, but I've seen that there were also, like, I think the same author here would, because there is the, on the right, and on Reddit, all the, like the other topics that they were discussing, etc. And this is not exclusively about whether should I identify. This person is not just out there to identify, I presume, or at least not completely whether something is worth being quoted or not academically, right? So this is the first thing that I notice myself, right? This is a YouTube channel, videos as actual sources, but just because they were showing masses of people beating actual human beings beating each other, right, for the sake of, well, it was extremely close to the same places that I'm studying, and there is some sort of tradition dating back from the Middle Ages, and there was, of course, no scientific, let's say, claim to. I was just saying, look, it might have been similar, because it was actually showing how human groups beat each other in that way that, in fact, as military historians, we often say, being the way it happens historically. A few minutes, at the longest, of intense beating, very compact groups, eventually distancing each other, going back and forth like sort of sea waves on the shore. And that's it, right? Another time I quoted a guy that I knew personally, was not even a historian, but he was writing something about I don't remember what I quoted him for even, but it was a reliable source about how, about medieval warfare in a specific case. And that was not even, and that happened, by the way, even in my doctoral thesis. That is something which I think I quoted tens of thousands of times, several hundreds, thousands of sources, and of course nobody ever told me, you should have not quoted this, or even if they had not liked that I had quoted, which would have been hardly the case, would say, well, you didn't do, your homework in doing all the rest, right? So my first question is, who the hell does actually search for YouTube videos for quoting stuff, or who does think that a YouTube video is, as the author said here, not even remotely comparable to proper academic publications, be it as monographies or essays? Nobody really knows. This is the point of it all, in my opinion, that this is, as a historian, a pretty strange question to ask, and a pretty strange answer to give regarding to my YouTube channel. I want to stress, this is a YouTube channel. You see, when I watch, there are, for example, professors talking on YouTube. And in that sometimes there are actually filmed university lessons, and I can guarantee you also, because I've seen it firsthand, and I also taught in university, that I don't know how to tell you, and this makes me wonder about it. Do you actually know how people teach stuff at university? Because if the sense is that what I do on YouTube is fundamentally something, of course, not comparable to proper academic publications, be it as monographies, as essays, which I explicitly said, in fact, mostly in those historian videos that I mentioned before. The point is, why should I have done that? And who is really to think that a YouTube video of this kind should be treated as such? And I'll even mention, by the way, my defense, that in all honesty and objectivity, and given that all my work is public, so I'm not hiding, of course, anything. Again, otherwise I wouldn't be on the internet in the first place. I don't know if you ever listened to, check Harvard lesson on, the Franks, whatever other, migration era topic that here could be cited. They're normally, yes, they're basic medieval sort of history lessons for presumably students of the first year, but I can tell you that I would never make such a shallow lesson, first of all, at university about that, but I objectively must say that just check some of my videos, basic videos about the Franks, and make a comparison and tell me which one is really more nuanced, more informed, and more critical, and sort of more effective at the end of the day for properly teaching. Because again, the way it works at university is that you go to these lessons in say thinking, at least this was my hope at the beginning, that professors would give you actually the most deep and insightful and informed lesson ever about when you introduce this basic medieval history. This doesn't happen, right? And one of the reasons why, and they are even actually very good professors, right? And I'm not going to say, as usual, how ranked my faculty in particular is, because otherwise, you can say, well, if you don't even say which one it is, doesn't matter. Yes, and I don't do that because I've never revealed my my identity. That's the only reason why I'm not doing so. And actually, by revealing a bit of things, you could even easily get to the faculty, and at that point, maybe not recognize me, but given that we actually the only guy that specializes in military history, you could finally identify me. But aside from that, one of the reasons why I actually am here on YouTube is that I find it extremely more effective for anyone, that the same persons that I could meet in those lessons when they're listening to me, like everywhere in the world, listening to the same thing I do there, naturally with a bit more of YouTube cut, which doesn't mean that it's less research or that I would say less things than I would, or less proper things that I would do in the lesson, right? In the lesson there, I would actually have more difficulties to compact everything, so I would make it actually more simple. My YouTube videos are, even in the basic version, way more noise ants, right? And it's also easier just to be here in my room rather than in a classroom with 50 people that are yawning or looking at their iPhones or not listening, or are listening, and that may do, as it sadly must say happens, particularly stupid questions all the time, just at 10% can't be saved, and that interrupt, and that want this and that, and you have to spend more time and more breadth and more words to answer. It's actually quite frustrating, and telling you the truth, I must tell you is that I don't like teaching at all. I prefer, at least at university, and I prefer by far writing, right? And part of the reason why I'm here in Schwerpunkt is also this one, right? And I'm not a professor, I'm an assistant, right? So it's a very different thing, but it gets down to the same problems. Actually, professors tend to delegate to you much of the worst stuff, exactly, because it's incredibly annoying. But that's a free choice I made, but it's not, say, the first thing I see myself doing, because I first of all publish, then I do Schwerpunkt, and then I have this thing. In any case, my point being, again, given you have to say, I understand that behind this question there is a bit of a sense, if we don't see the evidence, we shouldn't care. And I don't think it's a good approach, right? But I understand that by not seeing it, you don't see it. So if you are, as here the point is raised, you don't have the actual, here the term is wisdom, the guy says. I would say the competence to identify the actual historical information within my content, so that you can evaluate whether I'm delivering that correctly or not. I can say the same about you in reverse, right? Why would somebody that is not qualified necessarily know this? First of all, I would like to say this, that even though I'm a PhD in medieval history, I would never tell to anyone, like, you don't have this title, so whatever you say doesn't matter, right? Nor these guys here doing it. Actually, I must give them, they're fairly objective. Nobody is, going astray from, say, all the realm of possibilities, right? But I do understand the distrust as well, but it's exactly because I come from this background that I perfectly know that it's incredibly more important. This is an advice I give, to evaluate somebody's content on the basis of what they're actually doing. And not just because this is my personal opinion, but because, and I would like to break this down further in the future as well, I come from a particular academic background, that is the European continental one. And most of my viewers, and most, I presume, the users of Reddit, I don't know, I actually know where the historian that is answering me is coming from, and I will not say anything about that. It's actually European, but it's apparently from post-socialist Europe, which I'm not, and that makes actually a massive difference. This is not to say this guy is doing anything bad at all, but it is still another story. I had a girlfriend from post-socialist Europe who was also into academia, and I've seen how certain things work, and I of course know it's a different world. But given that I work with, in fact, an overwhelming majority, and this is what I'm specifying this, not to say, well, what you say is bad because it can. No, absolutely not. I'm not saying that. Even if I could, or think the opposite, right? The point I'm making here is that whoever makes the stuff, it's going to be consumed, just like my videos, by an overwhelming and disproportionate majority of Anglo-American, sort of broader Anglosphere, right, users of some sort. And I realized just from what I actually learned in the decades of my life, and also the one now of historical working, that there is a very big divide in the way of thinking, in the way of thinking history specifically, which is also another reason why I actually came here on YouTube, because from my country, and I'm not going to say anything where I come from. This is what you have to get. You will not know who I am, and so whether I have a PhD or not, until you'll know my name and surname, right, and what I look like, because it's going to happen at some point. But at least there are ways to know where I come from. It's actually very easy. I'm not going to tell you how, but those who know, and that's not a big deal either, right? But the point is, as a marketing choice, which as far as the quality of the historical content that I can make for YouTube in this format, I would never compromise with. But in general, as an idea, right, as business thing, I'd say, well, I want to be yet that other continental Western European voice that I don't see and hear very much around, and especially when it gets down to academic culture. And one of the I would digress endlessly on this topic, but one of the things that I've always been very vocal about regarding the difference between, say, France, Germany, Italy, etc., and the Anglosphere, is that the Anglosphere, from our perspective, is dramatically, and in my opinion unjustifiably, relying on scholarship above practically anything else, right? I can simply say that we prefer primary sources and the Anglosphere prefers scholarship, because, of course, we do go in parallel, scholarship and primary source, but for many reasons that are very complicated to explain. I can assure you that even though and I must say this without any modesty, in fact, we do actually have the best academies, and this is notorious. I mean, just look at the university rankings, the general names, etc. Market is another thing. How publications circulate is another thing. How they are even sponsored is another thing. How institutions claim things about themselves is another thing. I'm looking at the actual selection within the same institutions, and even abroad, because it does turn out that there is that capacity recognized also overseas. Our point is primarily what you say must make sense historically, and only later we will focus on who says that and whether they're referenced. The reason why I say this will be clearer now in a while, but it obviously gets down to the fact that even talking to some of the finest scholars in our world, revered professors, etc., and there are, say, pros and cons, right? For example, it's much easier to talk to an Anglosphere scholar, just to contact, in part because they have more money, right, than our own. We do have problems of haughtiness in that regard, etc. And sometimes I betray that, even though I'm very, not really unconventional, but I myself drew heavily also from, say, Anglo-Saxon culture, and I'm actually very thankful to it, even though I must criticize it when I see that it's not what I expect. I've been criticizing the new military history for, I think at this point, obvious reasons, independently from where I come from. And what fascinates me in that sense is why that happened historically, because that's all I do. You see, this is going beyond quotes. This is trying to make sense of things first and foremost, and then verifying whether that thing is real or not. That's how I operate. I don't go search for, is this person an actual historian or not? Because honestly, by experience, I can immediately tell from anyone, not just whether they're historians or not, but from the most basic historical taste, for example, what kind of political orientation they have. But not the most obvious one, right? Literally, a very shaded one. And I don't know, psychologically, I'm enormously fascinated with this. Also morally, scientifically, I think history is a lot of fun also for this. And in any case, I don't understand for this reason who, even in our world, would be concerned with the authenticity in a legal or sort of quotable sense about any YouTube video, for that matter. I mean, if I have to write an article, my first thought is not, I've heard that thing on YouTube and I want to quote it, right? It's all about books. I've told you many times, and some of you, this is also a claim I made, right? Just like my doctorate, whatever, I never showed you, but you asked me to make a video tour of my 14,000 volumes library, mostly about military history, right? And that would explain a lot also about how I work, considering that, honest, and this much I can say, it's mostly digitalized, but there are actual books of the finest. Also, I think they're worth, even if they're not expandable in this sense, easily hundreds of thousands of euros, just per se. But you can imagine what it means to have tens of thousands of books digitalized, plus the other ones I have scattered. I'm not saying where, in my vicinity, let's say this much, how easy it is to access an infinite amount of sources, which still doesn't justify. This much is true. This is the entire point of the thing, that I could make videos and source in everything I say. Right? I will tell you about the complexities of that. Also, speaking of the type of work I do, and surely it is congruent with the perplexity that a person may have about my content, especially having not followed it for a long time, not being acquainted my dialectic, my English, or whatever. But if you are to trust me about what I'm telling you, should, given the background that I've given you, understand how, say, irrelevant for me it is to quote every single thing I say, as I actually do when I work professionally, and how I actually do cite both sources and scholars when the thing gets narrowed down to the point that you do need that kind of evidence and quoting. So in order to understand the point, if you look at my battle videos, for example, they are largely, unless sometimes, and I can tell you, my master thesis was, it took a pretty long time to be written. There were, 30 sources on a single battle at the end of the 13th century. Well, imagine explaining that battle in a bit, which I will do, and in that case I will quote, because I have actually worked for it for 9 months fundamentally, which is not the rate at which I can make videos on YouTube, even though I greatly speeded up my capacity of finding sources for the purpose of YouTube channel, of putting them together, of actually providing. I don't make a battle video anymore at this point if I haven't read at least all the sources that exist, right? The primary ones on this topic. Just the other, when was it? Weeks ago, I made a video about the Battle of Largs. It required as all the type of videos, a certain type of evidence that I could rely on, but more of what the sources I use and how I use them, and why I don't largely don't cite them, and why I think it's irrelevant compared to what I actually put out, which I think is the most important, way more for what you can get from it as a pool of information than anything. And there's all a philosophy about this, because if you stop to saying, okay, well, since you don't cite them, I don't know what to do with my content. It's a bit like saying, what I criticize in a scientific sense, that is to say, since something is not demonstrated, not just I don't know whether it exists or not, but I will assume that it's not even worth looking into those who at that point do not provide an evidence that can't be actually found out there, because evidently in this case I was not born taught, and that's what I've been trained for. The most important thing is reasoning at those bigger levels, and immediately by the sheer experience that you have matured in using the actual sources in a technical way, you can immediately read something and say, I don't know, maybe this is a scholar whammer, but the thing he's saying is actually wrong, and I can easily prove you why that is wrong. And obviously, if I were to do that at every single opinion expressed in a video, I would have to make an actual research to point out, to source every single thing that this person says and quoting other stuff, etc. And at that point, I wouldn't be able even to leave, not just to make YouTube videos. So as much as I appreciate the fact that some people see, because I must say this, that some people see me as a creditable source of information, I don't really get how anyone can think to a YouTube video in order to source something of that importance. We will get to the point now, because there are other comments about this discussion that actually explain also the relation with those who want, of course, to know specifically the source and follow me for that reason, and even ask me about and why I don't answer them. So I'm not hiding everything. You can find everything there. I am simply addressing all of it. Yes, these are not academic publications. They're not in the type of monographic or essay style. Can you find me actually a YouTube video that actually provides you with that without being an incredibly shallow and superficial content that basically says, that quotes this scholar and this source, but obviously doesn't explain the much bigger deal, that is the entire reason why we actually make history. Because I have a couple of examples there. Okay, I will not make names, but I have developed there, quite an experience regarding the pattern that suspiciously that type of content tends to assume. And with all the consequences, by the way, in the type of format, on the quantity that can be put out, but also very often the incredibly rigid and moralistic, but at that point immoral sort of, ideological relativism. That is to say, the last and probably only YouTube channel that I saw that was fixated about, quoting everything was actually one that I hadn't had to doubt from an actual historian that was naturally young and was evidently, fresh and basically making the whole point of the channel evidently being saying, I'm teaching how to use the scientific method by quoting sources, whatever, even though, of course, it was like a political commentary of some sort, of course, criticizing some incredibly dumb historical content that you can find on YouTube. And this guy basically showed this model, like this attitude, like this. Say the object of his criticism of that other guy's content was like shooting on the Red Cross, was saying this guy is following the, because there was even an actual bibliography that he had put out, so that everybody could realize where he was drawing his ideas from. And so the video was based on criticizing this content by saying it's so ideological because those works are outdated or whatever. And if you want to have an actual introduction to this topic, I can't quote really all the works, the great works that have been done, but I will pick two that I decided that are better, and he is a person that openly states that is into historical materialism. And at that point you understand that any kind of objectivity, criticism, scientific or moral value gets out of the window. I don't care if you can't quote who wrote what, going after the others, engaging and restraining yourself into the limits of in fact, being somebody else's tale. And I don't need to remind to anybody who has a minimal academic experience the complete and magnitudinal disaster that we are witnessing all over the world regarding the literal collapse of scientific quality, value whatsoever of publishing, for reasons that are notorious even in terms of why we got to hyper specialization. But what in that sense, what kind of scientific and moral reasons there are behind that, right? Why would, say, a part of the world began to go downhill on a specific, like after specific, say, ideologies, right? I'm not making the usual point, it's just about Marxism. Yes, it's also about that and the consequences of that, but it's, I think, something much bigger, like of which that is also basically the consequence of, it has to do with essentially laziness. There is no other way around that, which you may think is ironic because I'm the one who doesn't quote sources, but you will forgive me if I think that there are a bit more important things to talk about, and given that we're also running out of time, and I don't think that, again, quoting every single thing every step of the way is feasible, nor actually that something that you would see in a normal academic environment for which you would pay to listen for when simply scholars are talking to one another, right? When I go to a conference and I have the opportunity to engage in debate after, say, having exposed my piece with the top experts on the topic that are, of course, glad to be there, we actually don't discuss with one another, literally quoting the source in every statement we make. I don't know how you think reality works, how humans work, or how an academy works, but that's reality, and that's how we talk with one another, and that's how I talk on YouTube, largely, having actually a base that I derived from a scientific, bibliography that I will explain why I'm not simply going to give you, right? Which is wanted, right? There is a specific reason why I don't do that, and it is also surely greed in part. It's the fact that I worked for getting there and for getting all that information in my original synthesis and expression, and I want people to get interested in history because that's how I got interested in history back in the day. Nobody gave me the bibliography ready. I had to search for things by myself. I had to develop a capacity of my own. I had to reflect on history with my professors, right? We had to make a point about the wall, and only later, or in the meanwhile, but at a different level, you start doing that hard mechanical work, and to presume that a person that doesn't do this has the actual capacity with a bibliography to be able to understand, say, in a meaningful way what that bibliography actually means, rather than offering your best insight on it after all that work, is to take for real advantage of this person. Because that person at large doesn't have the palest idea of the quality of historical and historiographical work. If he is in that phase, that is a very specific one in the university path of a person, right? So I will explain this better later, because there's a beautiful example of this that explains to you also why I simply don't have time to answer people. I don't have to, right? So the thing goes incredibly on. It says, still, it's the historian's answer said that my channel is not peer-reviewed either, right? And I honestly, like, arriving at this point in my life, this is the first time I heard that YouTube channels could be peer-reviewed, right? I don't think it's outside the realm of possibilities, but that's pretty bizarre, because at least from the academic background where I come from, peer reviews are just when you actually publish something, and I didn't know that scholars did this on YouTube. Right. Actually, I think that you could have a freedom, especially about the things that you work on, because, by the way, there are many reasons why somebody could not give the sources. For example, I could be working, as I do, on some content that I'm particularly jealous of, and of course, I know, generally speaking, that that it will not be stolen, because history has this beauty, which is also partly the reason why it's useless to source in this format. That is to say, every person sees things in a different way. And the reason why we train historians is exactly the intelligence of reading through things, not being sort of automatic machines that work just by quoting in every single reality of their life, even when they start literally thinking about history or whatever. They do it only when they actually publish stuff. And even though I don't doubt there could be, channels that specialize in peer reviewing and scientific content that is let out there, can be lessons or whatever. But let's be honest about this. Everybody knows that in conferences, right? Normally, when you present an article, you're not actually quoting every source. Like, I have 20 minutes to speak. I have quoted hundreds of things. You literally can't. I mean, you are speaking to an audience that is supposed to understand whether you are at that level of of qualification just by what you say. And most of this work is done by the people who, of course, put together the speakers. They check, of course, their curriculum, which is important, but very often they could be bad as well. And normally in a conference, you know that there is that guy that is bright, while those other pieces were lame. How do you understand that? Because they actually quote every single thing out of the way. That means you have not listened to an actual university lesson or academic conference in the first place. It's very bizarre to me to be reading this discussion. It's almost surreal, right? So I understand that this is on the internet, and so on the internet people also do strange things, and this general background can be about let's pretend that this guy is unqualified, and or since he doesn't provide anything that resembles a scientific thing, this whole thing cannot be qualified in the first place. Well, it doesn't actually work like that, of course. So, and I must say that there is mostly an objective and decent limit this discussion goes, because other people would immediately, and this is, I think, the damage that one could get, and I think it's perfectly fine. I'm the one who doesn't source. People are free to say whatever they want, but if somebody reads this and wants really to know about my content, you see how much I'm explaining in, for example, in a YouTube video compared to what can be said. I'm, of course, the content makers. Of course, I have a lot of things to say, but how everything can be put into a bit of an objective perspective, and there is way more about this now. So again, that's the thing it says. So and this is actually a fair conclusion, because it says, so it's impossible for someone not familiar with a topic at hand to, quote, fact check the content of the videos. All right? This is true. Right? In brackets it says, long digression says, which is something that is so tricky about all these historical YouTube channels. And again, I would like to know which ones, because that's the point. Most of the long sort of, because it says the videos may be long and detailed. Which ones exactly? Because I've seen lots of, say, YouTube channels putting together, I don't know, different videos they made before to make a long series of, say, I don't know, made so many battle videos about the Peloponnesian War, then I patched them all together. There is a 4 hours and a half video, and so, this is so long and detailed. But if you actually watch them, you perfectly realize there that they don't even enter into the basic historical criticism that, modestly, I do actually provide, at least to a much greater extent than what I've been seeing so far. On here, it may be crazy for me to be here in the first place, because as you see, I'm not even dramatically popular, considering my subscriber numbers, etc. There are lots of dynamic playing into that, but it's obvious that people are not interested in actually long and detailed stuff, right? Because it's self-evident. There aren't even so many history channels on YouTube as you may think, and part of the reason is that people don't care very much about learning history, they have some strange mixed emotionalistic hype for whatever thing that reminds them of teenage video games they were playing at the time, or what kind of nationalistic and or socialistic kind of political delirium they're fascinated with. They're paranoid about their own country. They're paranoid about others being, distrustful. So they see somebody who talks about their thing. They all assume that you must essentially conform to all their sort of deranged worldview. Take this into account when you see somebody who makes 1,800 videos and you are to evaluate actually what he's doing out there, because this you can understand also from not watching my videos. That at that point should be watched. All right. So it says this videos may be long and detailed, but all these historical YouTube channels. But if they don't provide sources, and since they aren't peer-reviewed, they could almost say anything, and most viewers wouldn't be wise enough to what to believe or not to believe. Fair. I agree. I completely agree. I just think the context of this all is a bit, again, different from what I think. In fact, YouTube channel should spark the discussion from now. Dan says third, so I went back his videos on his channel for almost a year, which is impressive. I hope that, I don't know, as we will see now, it sounds like he didn't actually watch them, but the point gets to my rate of videos, and this apparently raises a red flag for them as well, because it says the trend that even exists today is that he uploads a video, mostly around 1-2 hours long or even more, pretty much every day. And his topics are all over the place. Modernity, early modern age, medieval age, Renaissance, late antiquity, Napoleonic era, early antiquity, Europe, Asia, America. And this list, for example, is surely something a bit more coming from a historian. Like, I may not be right, I may be wrong, but I read this list compared to the one before. It's not a radical difference or something I would fund. In fact, in fact, as an authentic sourcing, right? My knowledge of, but there is a different historical view of this author compared to the one that posed the question, right? And then the conclusion: it's all over the place. Given that he puts out such long videos about such a broad variety of topics in such short succession, I highly doubt that he has ample time for each of these videos to properly source them, or to gain a deep and accurate knowledge about each topic with all the academic works beforehand. I don't know any academic expert that actually can claim nowadays to have a full understanding of the amount of bibliography that exists even on the very topic that he is specialized in, which I can tell you, by the way, from a personal experience standpoint, is an incredibly hard thing to do. And you know why? Because when you have to write a work, you just are you and your brain is not designed to retain even a consistently relevant amount of all the information that is going to be present out there, which means that even if you have studied a book over and over again, every single time, and this is just a book or an article, every single time you read it again, you will find something new or you got a different impression, a different perspective that you didn't know before. So while it's valid to point out that, of course, and this is something that I explicitly say in my videos very often, that I'm obviously not expert, at least for what my standard of expertise actually is on all these topics, and that it is obvious, self-evident. I wonder, again, what kind of standard is expected here from a YouTube channel, without mentioning something that, aside from the fact that, again, every video I make should be judged on the basis of what it actually is, and not how often I post. This is actually a duty in the measure in which you think that I could even be, right? So in fact, the guy says, I highly doubt that he has the proper research, accurate knowledge, whatever. And actually, about this, I could tell you that, yes, again, I'm no expert, but I have, 9 years, actually, yes, of university training, plus other years of professional work in the same field. I have spent, I have learned way more about history outside university than at university. I have made 1,800 videos on each of these pretty specific topics that I'm theoretically able to provide all the answers that about the content that I upload that I can as far as a historical explanation goes. What does it mean? It means that, of course, I would never be able to, already now, with only a bit more than 10,000 subscribers, I'm able, of course, to find any space for covering even a significant part of the questions that I post, or even more often, and the ones that I find, in this sense, as an incredibly precious pool of information, all the impressions that I get from all the positive or negative feed, all the misconceptions, all the mishearing, right? The first thing, as we'll see now, it starts from the fact that I doubt that most people, in fact, are even understanding any of the work I'm doing, just in a basic cognitive, communicational level, right? And it's extremely easy to point that out, and honestly, as a historian, I think it's extremely fascinating, right? That's the thing that helped me enormously as far as even my professional work is actually concerned, because it makes me see where people come and from and go to with practically anything that I can read revolving around my channel, right? So the point I mean with the explanation is that if, let's put it, I'm not going to answer every question every person poses me. And the interesting thing gets at the end of the video, because at that point there is an engagement with one of my followers. And again, everybody here has been fairly nice. They've said the thing objectively. They have inserted a bit sort of this suspicious mode on, but they stuck to some basics, and that's fine. But in my opinion, about a question that nobody ever pretended, right? I understand that if somebody, I am also from the side of the person who will surely pose the question, the one give to answer. You don't know who I am, all right? You don't know my work, or even if you know it, from the answer here I understand it's just you don't even enter the content. You just look at basically the titles, right? So at that point, it's as if, oh, this was irrelevant in practice. But the idea, and of course, you can't listen to all of them. And again, here you're leaving the benefit of the doubt, but in a way that somehow is more leaning towards this guy's a charlatan because he made so much content about difficult parts of history, so you can't know everything. Well, it's difficult to know something about all of this that makes sense, right? But if I make a video about this topic, nobody forces me to, because there is not much of a strategy behind the type of content I make. It's because I know about that and I want to talk about that. And if somebody more competent than me arrives and says, look, what you said here is wrong because of this and that, and I prove you. And this has never happened, because all the type of comment I got about my channel, aside from being positive in the wide majority of the cases, were incredibly, I don't want to use negative definition, but say self-contained, let's put it this way. And even the criticism sometimes, it's always for ethno-nationalistic reasons, There is a certain area of Europe where everything gets messy. Every single video you make, you start having this thing going algorithmic, and there is one chunk of the people who comes and says one thing, and another chunk comes and says another, and they start aggressing each other on the base of, where do you come from? You don't speak my language, this kind of stuff, right? And most of that is not scientific. And the reason why I can say that is because of what you hear, that at least that I claim to be a doctor and to have acquired that kind of competence that, however, I could have even if I didn't get the title, because even before that I could say many things that were factually accurate and correct, more than, I don't know, the people who were following me or were trying to, I don't know, imposing me some kind of incredibly reductive and in fact claustrophobic and really limiting limits, whereas you could easily find, if you work all the time, as I do, all the time and energy to really research what you really want, right? So I know that the average scholar today in the world is objectively a grossly undereducated person, just an uncultured person. And I say this without any problem. That's why I'm not saying that, it just takes to be a PhD to be an actual expert about anything. But it doesn't even say, if you're a PhD, doesn't even mean that you're a good historian necessarily, just per se. I mean, you're more likely to be, right? But the only thing that actually matters is what you actually understand in reality. So if the point is, okay, he makes so many videos at a time, but I don't even follow them or analyze them or identify what is supposed to be better or worse. So you're not actually offering an objective basis on which you can simply say whether that content is good or not. Well, I'm not sure that that's also very historical, per se, right? Because history, again, is an existential condition. It doesn't start from, again, whether a person sources things for others to simply say, this guy sources the content, so it must be better. Just think about how dumb a person would be to think something like that. I consider my audience to be more intelligent than that. That's the reason why I don't actually... one of the reasons why I actually don't source everything I say. Right? Which can, by the way, easily be found out there, right? And I will explain better now a perfect example for that, because I'm not talking internet here. I'm talking actual people with that own actual scientific bibliographies, and that still, however, treat history in what I think to be a strange way. It says, given, all right, we read this, all right, and he says that that's not even taken into account that he has to record the video, edit in all the pictures and paintings displayed throughout the videos, and then to upload the video itself, all which take up a considerable amount of time. Yes, it does, but it's not this dramatic thing. First of all, I don't give a damn about sourcing every single thing I say, which would take an enormous bibliography that I don't have the time of doing, with all the possible references that I memorize and then I lay out in the tens for every video, at least, besides the one that I'm using for the sketch, for example, in order to maintain this rhythm, by the way, because I work in an extremely economic way as far as the technical making, not the content making, is concerned. If you look at my videos, there is the images, I put a lot of them in it, but I don't follow what I'm saying, right? They're just selected, and by the way, have all some depots of images from previous videos that I collect, and so I can easily sometimes, find a topic and putting 400 actually accurate pictures in, because a way you can appreciate, for example, my historical accuracy is that if I talk about a given topic, I don't put a filler image just to make you pretend, I'm talking about, I don't have the clear example now, but I'm talking about the 14th century a 14th century medieval knight armor, and I will use, I don't know, some random pictures of fantasy images from artists about that, I will actually find the exact armor for that exact century, from that exact place, from an actual picture that I can use for commercial purpose, right? So images are important. That actually doesn't take very much to edit at all. The computer can be left do most of the thing. It's searching for the pictures that takes most of the time. Putting them in line, I don't edit them, basically. I just give them a bit of color adjustment. It takes a couple of minutes for every video, even if there are hundreds. Say 5 minutes if I have 200 pictures in it, and that's it, right? So it's not, you see, you don't know how it is, right? But you assume how it is. And yes, overall, it does take a fair amount of time, but I still have hours of work, for example, for academic stuff that have nothing to do with my channel. And I perfectly balanced this over an amount of time for which, if I went back 5 years ago and said to myself, every day you have to do this, I would say I would never make it. And today it's just like drinking a glass of water, right? So if you think that that's the measure by which I should be judged, just think of what it could be happening in my mind after decades of historical study. I mean, it's obvious that I can make all these videos because I just happen to have accumulated a lot of things in my mind. Like if I talk to one of my professors to come being called to speak, I don't know, some of course prepare stuff, etc. Others simply speak, because guess what, they know what they're talking about. And sometimes it's not even like if you ask them, let's say, about their field of specialization, you think that's normal, right? But if you were to ask, I don't know, a basic topic like the ones that are listed in the question at the beginning, do you think that I would need any sourcing at hand, or to list, just to speak for 2 hours or 4 hours or 10 hours about an effective explanation of what actually happened at the time, I don't know, the migration era, for a YouTube format, and still being historically relevant and qualitative? Well, to me, it's a child's play. You know, it may be that I have, again, this experience now on YouTube, and doing stuff every day, I can assure you, is really does work. And there is no doubt, by the way, that my initial content was worse than the one I make now. But guess what? You tend to grow up when you do work. And that's why I keep doing this. And it seems to me that what I do, given the balance that I gave it, is pretty good stuff for the YouTube average. So even if you're critical of YouTube entirely, as I simply told you myself, as I also didn't even know that it was peer-reviewed stuff on YouTube, frankly, the question is, what are we even talking about? Right? Imagine that you are a PhD, that you have studied history for years, you do this with would you even care to put sources out there? Or is it just a sort of, way that from the other side you can say to sort of disqualify somebody who does not do that on YouTube just because, again, yes, we know that the average is not that trustworthy, but that's something I could easily tell you at an academic level about scholars in general. And even about scholars that are actually famous, whose works are in part even revered, and that, in fact, especially in the Anglosphere, you're forced to even take into consideration to the point that you can't say that it wasn't a great work just because everybody at some point had to quote them, right? We have arrived to that level of, I don't know whether paroxysm is the good term, but in this case, I can tell you that the herd psychology is not just something pertaining to YouTube followers for that matter. And in that sense, I don't treat if I didn't believe that what I'm saying is actually just like what I just stated, capable of challenging somebody's mind, I wouldn't even make this content in the first place. so I care about the whole thing, right? So yes, it all takes a considerable amount of time, but if you have been studying certain topics for years and years, just like the broader Middle Ages, it's very easy at least to do the kind of work that I do with an actually reliable background. And again, if somebody doubts of this because they think that, I don't know, there is a magical world in which there are actual human beings that interact with one another vocally in the same way they do when writing papers, just know that that world does not exist. Right? It's not real. And just pick the standard of a top university history class you can find on YouTube recorded, and go tell me that what I'm saying in my videos is actually something that at least is irrelevant compared to it. That's very bizarre to me, considering what I've been up to, frankly. And not that this is, again, something that here is openly being said, but even when there is a high doubt, never underestimate what can be on the other side, because in the moment which you do that, you're actually also putting your own credibility at stake. And again, here it's a completely friendly, context in which we're not at each other's throat, or we're not really doing this for earning something, right? Actually, I want to thank anyone who is discussing and criticizing. That's perfectly fine on places like Reddit, etc., because that does increase my visibility. And so I actually have a greater chance to speak my mind, to respond, to be more engaging at that level, right? Again, my content is very long, difficult to digest as a consequence, but that's how I do that, because I'm thorough about it, and I'm as thorough as I am, generally speaking, in all things I do, with different degrees given the context that we're discussing. Then there is an interesting thing, finally, my first recognition of this in absolute terms, because on YouTube nobody ever compliments for this. That is to say, the one thing he does indeed source is the pictures he uses for his video. But then here the suspicious mode is on, because it says, all which are from Wikipedia as it seems. They are shortly displayed at the very end of, not sure if that applies every time in the video, which makes me all the more suspicious as to why he doesn't source where he takes his supposed knowledge from. So that's an important thing, and I've been quite open a couple of years ago about the thing. So basically, I began the Schwerpunkt essentially thinking that for some reason grabbing pictures from the broader internet was sort of okay. I blurred them because I knew, of course, that there was something about that could create problems, and I thought that people wouldn't really care so much, being the authors, because I used to watch some other history channels. They used always for the thumbnail for some few seconds, which would count for fair use. Actually, high resolution images from, say, think about Ospreys. I mean, every kind of specific artistry that I still see on YouTube, people really, doing without too much concern. I blurred them a little bit, so I thought that would count for, for fair use as well. But it's a very gray area, as we all know, and when I monetized the channel, but which I did only because YouTube began to monetize, say, to put ads unbeknownst to me, which they do when you don't. I had a sort of conscience crisis, and I said, okay, you know what? I will re-upload everything with actually legal pictures, let's call it in this way, which is explained later in the comments. I mean, the reason why I have all that from Wikimedia Commons, that is essentially all the pictures you find in Wikipedia, is that these are virtually the only pictures in a quantitative sense that I can use commercially from the internet. Basically, if you search for similar licenses online, you basically don't find anything as far as in fact, this especially historical topics are concerned. Wikimedia Commons images have been expanding. I hope they will not shut down Wikipedia, put it for, you have to pay for it. It just bothers me in the first place because of AI. They have all these problems now that they fish data from all their sites, and they don't like that legitimately, of course. And here says, not sure if it applies every time in the video. Well, yes, it does. It may happen that, for example, when I make, early modern warfare, early modern history videos, usually the images I can find on Wikimedia are all public domain, right? Because they are scanned manuscripts that belong, from sources that are made it all public. So it happens that maybe, there is even a video of 400 images from that, and I have to source only 20 of them because they have the specific license that requires that. Otherwise, I'm free to use them without any sourcing, right? This thing, which makes me all the more suspicious. So he even admits he's suspicious as to why he doesn't source. Oh my God! Oh no! How will we do? Where he takes his supposed knowledge from, right? So this I don't know whether this possessive adjective and supposed are meant to be as if this knowledge was, exclusively mine, because I don't source otherwise, or suppose as if, it was even sort of not actual knowledge, or, this guy, all this history, YouTube history channels, what a bunch of scoundrels they are, Well, let's put it in this way. The way I source the images is fine. Technically, and in the comment is actually pointed out, which is, and actually I'm here to be the most scrupulous of them all, because following simply, I think this is the end of his comment, then there are, of his response, and there are the comments says, to put it bluntly, these are other people, invoked legal sanctions or not attributing images outside the academy. There are rarely any sanctions for failing to reference. That is true, and we will discuss it now. And then exactly, the images are not cited, in brackets, in the academic sense so much as attributed, in brackets, in accordance to the terms of use for the Creative Commons copyright under which most Wikipedia Wiki Commons images are published. I would go even beyond that, because technically the fact that I do not associate the picture to the actual source, just imagine every picture I made, I should make a link that visually connects it, like at every second with that one, right? For 400 videos in a picture, and I honestly don't know, because in the license it's clearly written that they don't care in practice, and notoriously if they put it there, they don't, especially if it's a commercial license. But everything should be properly sourced. Now, what does properly mean there is just like fair use. It's a gray area that, of course, if you make all that list as I make at the end of the video of all the actual links even, everything looks, say, at least you were in good faith, like you were saying, look, I found this stuff, you can check it, and of course you can go back in time, if these, it can happen, by the way, because on Wikipedia Commons to see, some copyrighted materials. I found some Angus McBride stuff there that somebody uploaded there without any control, and every once in a while you find some pictures that are shut down because they are apparently under discussion, because it turns out they were copyrighted, you couldn't upload them there. So it's all actually much more messed up. But if it wasn't like, you couldn't use any picture aside from the public domain ones that, not needless to say, are practically, like at that point I wouldn't even search for them, because they would be just very, very boring to use, because they are very few and unspecific, right? But I think the way I attribute them is I technically does, I think attributing is the right. Attributing actually means that you're attributing it to the person that uploaded them under the actual license. So this is actually not even what here is written correctly, and I still actually quote them. I cite them at least in the way. Of course, they are. I post the link. I say, well, this is under this license by this guy, right? So that's my way of citing them. As far as the guy who says that there are less invoked legal sanctions for those who, do not attribute, do not cite specifically in art, right, in images rather than in the academy, is also right. I mean, this is the case, and that's something that even when you publish, you are aware of. It's incredibly difficult to draw the line, right? If I were to literally quote a phrase, right, on, for example, a 2 hours long video, well, it can happen, right? If I forget, for example, one date, one name, one definition, I can't pick it from somewhere, have some incredibly patchy sketches, etc. But what I do is always explaining what I read, right? Because I have, very compact pool of information that I could read, in 5 minutes, not even in 3 minutes, and that I can't speak for 2 hours long. Right, I have lots of references that I noted. I have, I'm following a broader point. By the way, there is a specific concept, right, that surely was expressed by someone else at some point, and that I learned, but that in this sense I can't quote specifically, because nobody's going to recognize it anyway. Again, reading straight from a book is illegal, immoral, wrong, and the person who gets caught should be really destroyed in that sense legally, which is also incredibly unlikely to happen, unfortunately, because most people, for example, if I have, for example, I have even open source published content out there, and I sleep at night thinking that there are potentially billions of people that can pick that and use it in some way, because at the end of the day, I'm the author. Any person who basically would talk about that topic, because I'm objectively the only one who studies it and that talks about it, would have to revolve around me. I actually think that makes me even more visible, and that actually increases my prestige, in a sense, as far as my work goes. Which is, I think, a bit the balance that forms between even the image creators, the artists that, you see, when I had 2 years ago, I decided to restructure my entire channel with those Wikimedia Commons licenses pictures. I actually asked other YouTubers that were using, again, high quality and high resolution images for their works without actually crediting them, whether they had ever thought about the problem. And these people said, well, no, I really didn't ever think about that. A bit like me, even though I actually did. And or maybe they wanted to be a bit more, not alarmistic, not to keep a lower profile. And I even contacted the actual artists, and I said, look, can I get the permission to use your work? I will blur it. And these people said, well, no, or nobody's going to watch it. Leave it there. Nobody aggressed me. Nobody said, no, absolutely, I will sue you if you do so. Right? So this stuff on YouTube, of course, is serious, so much that I stuck to it, basically as no other channel that I know of actually does, and I I feel, first of all, much better about it because now everybody can enjoy even very beautiful pictures, actually, without any problem in that sense. But it makes me also reflect on how, of course, there is a limit that would stand really in fair use that nobody, however, really knows what really gets down to. Because fair use is a big sort of proxy, let's say, just for saying the other guy doesn't care so much to sue you, but he could, because every single thing you use about somebody else, in theory, they could say no, take it down, or even have actually issuing legal action without asking, whatever. And this is not happening unless somebody's making considerable money just out of the actual pictures per se, right? So, but I see here in every thumbnail there is obviously somebody else's work, and somebody would click on the video also to watch that. So it's a considerable part of the wealth that people can make out of it, and I don't think it's so honest, but whatever. So regarding the things I say, again, it's all public, right? So if somebody has any problem with whatever, like they recognize that, I don't know, there is somebody who studied about that specific topic, whatever, but just by my style that I'm speaking out of my mind, right? That even if I know that, I don't know, somebody made that work and I used, I don't know, multiple monographies or essays to get the information from. First of all, and this should answer in great part the question about my actual, say, why I make these videos in part 2, is that most of the things that I actually read, even in those works, in my opinion, is not correct. I have a specific expertise. I specialize in the art of war, specifically in tactics, and I'm, of course, about a bit the whole package, operations, strategy, armaments, whatever, but it's mostly I look at politics because I'm a Clausewitzian. I have, as you know, I've read and commented the Von Krieg. I have a lot going on in my head, right? So I'm capable of articulating an original content just by reading the sketch and talking about it for hours. And you see me doing this every freaking day, right? Because if this even were scripted in the sense I were just reading from somewhere, you would immediately track it. And secondly, it would require, however, a much greater amount of work to put together, right? Instead, the type of content I do is just by the way I criticize it, of qualitative, right? It's not the one that, again, I often, again, quote sources and I cite them. I don't have, I made videos, I made, again, criticism of certain specific guys' works. So again, I don't even get why I should talk about the potpourri that I make every time just for somebody to do what with that. Listen to what I have to say as an actual historian or as an actual anyone, and just evaluate, given the level of complexity and complication, say whether I am actually into the thing or not. And I think most people follow me exactly for it, right? So here I would say the most interesting part of the discussion arrives because there is a guy whom I actually remember from my channel, who is, I hope, still a follower of mine, that asked me, I think when I made that video about the wars of Louis XVI of France, Western France, as a matter of fact, that wanted to know about essentially where I got the sources, the information from, right? And I feel bad for him because I didn't answer him. I think he posed me the question on YouTube comments, and I will be completely transparent about this. I mean, everybody knows it. I often read even from comments that I don't publish, right? But there is a reason why I don't, because just like here, I want to be discussed, but as far as my channel is concerned, I want everything to be tidy, right? Even positive comments that say things like that have nothing to do with the subject of the video, for example, or that are, in that sense, getting nowhere, I don't think a person should read. I want significant stuff, right? And if somebody starts questioning,
In some cases, for example, because they have literally not understood what I said.
over and over, it's fine if they do it outside of here, like on Reddit in this case, but I don't think that people who are actually watching the video are benefiting from it. Because it's already very complex to listen to me, because what I say, in fact, is of a certain importance, let's put it in this way, people use comments as a shortcut to evaluate whether the content is good or not. And a bit like this Reddit discussion is reflecting that. Since I don't answer about the stuff, people ask questions and or know about me, but still wonder about the stuff. And it's perfectly fine there. This guy also messaged me on my Schwerpunkt email that I will usually always read, right? But I don't have much of the time to answer. I remember I had similar experiences back in the day. There were some professors or some other people I looked up to that I was fascinated with the work of, etc. And that, of course, didn't have the time, but didn't really owe me anything, right? So even if it is harsh and maybe rude, even I can't answer everybody, first of all, but sometimes, like in this case, I deliberately wouldn't answer, and I explain why, right? And because this guy here was reading this conversation on Reddit for whichever reason, and he referenced this, and he wrote this, and it's quite interesting. I wanna reflect on what he says, because there are lots of interesting insights you can derive from it. So he says, I'm interested in this too. I've asked in his comments before what are his sources, but I've never gotten a reply. I think his type, he says he's wrote back that he wrote, or he has written back that, and I don't remember about this honestly, because I think I never talked about it, that he uses Wikimedia for the images. Well, it's just in the video, right? So I don't think I ever answered that. In any case, I've even emailed him asking for some recommendations on academic Carpathian history, but to no avail. Now, there is a specific reason why I did not do it. I will explain it. And it's powerful. I'm not saying it's going to be pleasant, but I think it's going to be more important than being pleasant, right? First of all, this person was perfectly right in asking me any question, like anyone, right? As much as I'm basically okay, at least, at not answering, right? It's something that will reflect on everybody involved in a way or another, and I'm okay with that. So, and I'll explain why I didn't answer in this case. First of all, again, writing a decent answer takes some time, even if it is just, oh, hi, thank you for reaching out with this kind of stuff, right? And I don't have much time in the first place, because as was noticed before, I do all this work every day. Even last time when I had to list something, and I was actually prone to answer this person, because I have my fair share of Carpathian, history, bibliography, and I could simply provide with some titles. The interesting stuff, though, is that this guy answered me, and I have the email still, I'm sure, wrote me by asking for some recommendation. Very polite, very fine. And he listed, actually, his own bibliography about Carpathian history. And it was an impressive one, to say the least, right? So, and he basically, now I don't remember because I didn't check the email back. Let's be honest, I don't care. But I remember that this list was, he claimed that he had read them, like it was, and I believe him, right? The fact that he was passionate about the Carpathians, that he was so much into them, and every once in a while you do find people who have this legitimate, genuine interest, they have actually read the stuff, the books, whatever. And I was about to answer because I had other titles as well, and there were titles of this that I didn't have, right? So the sense is that, like, the person before says you should know all all the possible stuff that is being published. This is impossible. I don't know how to tell you, but no professor actually manages that. There is not any living person today that has actually read everything that has been written on Carpathian history. If you have an idea on the amount of historical publishing on them, you are, even if you had read them all, you do not have even a minimal grasp of the entirety of it just by your own synthesis capacity. You just don't. Even if you had studied for 60 years, a lifetime, about Carpathian history, you wouldn't have the entire knowledge of it. So I can afford, given that I don't specialize on the Carpathians because I'm more Holy Roman Imperial, if you allow me, but that's just a little joke. I love France, by the way, telling you the truth. Both the Carpathians, the whole monarchic mystique. I was in France like 15 times on vacations. Even my ex was French. It was some the other ex before I said, one of both socialist countries, but I have this sort of varied tastes. Let's put it in this way. Oh my god, this was heavy. But what I was saying here is that I actually like that history, but I'm no expert in what I think an expert is. That is, a person who has studied exclusively Carpathian history all his life. Now, this guy, first of all, that, as I said before, from how people write, I normally know, and how they talk history and whatever, I know, for example, what age they are. Right? I don't have the certainty of it, but I'm sure this guy is in his first half of his 20s at the latest. Right? I don't think that he's older than that, even if he were. But the attitude at that point is mostly telling me that, as what I'm listing now, that even though he's surely knowledgeable himself about Carpathian history, there's something that really I must criticize, right? So that video where he asked information from was about a very simple account of, say, some of the most important campaigns that Louis VI carried out. Just basic facts about years against whom, in which dates, and explaining essentially. I don't remember again the subtitle, but it had to do with the mobilization. No, it was not about the mobilization, but still, it, of course, looked at all these various political issues with the various Western Frankish vassals, all that stuff. Now, it may sound a complex video for some, but I can tell you that I basically filled it just with my general knowledge, right? I just collected the info on the campaigns, and then I explained what was going on, why I checked some sources here and there, and made the video, right? As I usually do. And there is not like the deep, oh my god, this is also the thing that I didn't criticize before the historian answering me, is that you don't really need to have dominated every single publication, nor being, again, expert in the way we were saying before, in order to be reliable about the core of what you're talking about. It's not that one day we will discover that, I don't know, New Zealand was founded by Austria and we didn't know because somebody hadn't read up to the very last book ever written on Austrian or Netherlands history, right? Just to make the thing clear. If I talk about the wars of Louis VI, of course I'm talking about lots of stuff, how France was at the time, how armies worked, how they were composed. These are all things that I know from just having studied this stuff, but that is basic, right? What I explain people on about the art of war is that, generally speaking, for the Middle Ages, we think that everything has to be deconstructionalistically diverse or differentiated. It wasn't, right? I made in my doctoral degree a chapter that was 200 pages long, exactly to debunk by listing basically everything that was written for 60 years for a specific region in Europe, about every single contingent that was used, and studying, by the way, in the rest of the chapters, how they actually voted. So the picture is that they basically vote only the same way in that place, right? And that more or less they vote how like in the rest of Western Europe, right? In order to do this, I have gotten through the whole thing for years, and I have matured a specific understanding of that through the sources, because I can explain where you get that information from statistically, macroscopically, practically, concretely, and you make a simple analysis of that data, subdivided by polity in chronological order, and you can easily see something that matches at all political, military, and social level. It's, again, what I do for a living. So the point is that this video about Louis XVI was, from my perspective, very simple. Right? Now, this guy wanted to know what sources. I don't remember whether he wanted to know which sources I used for the video, or if he had any recommendation on other Capetian history works that he didn't know. Legitimate question. But the point here is the following. This person is posing me a question. He's demanding me something, right? He's demanding part of my time and my energies to answer him, right? And I don't have to, right? Even if it's rude, I think I'm a fairly polite person, and I care very much actually about this thing. So I pass as a bit like the a-hole. I'm aware of that, and it's on me, and it's fine. But there is something deeper in this question. It is to say, if you have all those books about Capetian history, and you have read them, and of course, each one of these books has a bibliography, and what I really discussed for that Louis XVI video is just something so basic. The question is, couldn't you actually find the same type of information? Like, I'm not really providing you with some, I don't know, unedited, innovative, never heard of information. It's literally the basic information about Louis VI's military curriculum. You have, like, I don't know, a dozen or 20 titles about Capetian history. Couldn't you really find everything you need? Right? Couldn't you easily find, I don't know, but even just through a Google search about the main sources on Louis XVI life, and even more so through actual books, and actually getting them in a way or another and finding out, right? Because again, I'm not making the video claiming, oh my god, now I'll tell you something that nobody knows, right? This is such deeply, obscure knowledge that I only know, and I will provide you with from secret source. Like, it's something you can find easily. It's all really basic. Major international issue campaigns. If you know the names of the historians that studied Louis XVI, you can easily find this, right? I realized that I could provide this information to you, but I don't even remember what he was asking specifically about that. Surely, yes, in the comments. I don't remember whether, again, in the email, so I don't know how much he was specifically interested about in that topic. But what should I do? Like, the apparent attitude there is, why do you show me all that bibliography for? Like, because you hope that, I'm crossing out everything that you've read, which, again, it would be pretty strange if you remembered that data about Louis XVI campaigns just by having read even all those books about Capetian history. That's not something, unless you're particularly expert about Louis XVI, in that case you shouldn't even ask the question, you would remember in the first place. So it reminded me of my younger self that was trying to harvest and treasure information from all the most reliable sources I'm at hand, because I'm sort of public through YouTube and the email, and so you can try. Well, that's okay. But in that regard, isn't it as if you weren't doing the job yourself as well, right? That's just the idea that it seems to me. It's like, again, the historian that answers, like, yes, I'm highly suspicious about his supposed knowledge. Well, you don't even listen to what I said. Like, you didn't say, well, I listened to this video. It sounds like garbage, so no, it's just bad. Right? You could easily do that. There are lots of people who surely would listen to me as soon as they listen that I reject, I don't know, historical materialism, for example, and or that I have a certain interpretation of, I don't know, the Byzantine Empire, that I call it like that, or the whole, that they must immediately assume easily by default. And most people don't, because they don't even start to listen to even 1/10 of my content in a single video, or where I go with that, right? And so that's where it gets really interesting. That my content is so, I don't know, this is, I don't know, alt-right, which, if anybody wonders, I think it's pure leftism, right? Or you know, whatever, that I'm a conspiracy theorist, or what. You can say everything, right? You would say this guy is, you know, everything in the contrary of it, right? I've been called, you know, basically it's the opposite of it all. It's either I'm a Nazi or I am protecting the Jews, right? This kind of things that nowadays, you know, I don't know, you can easily find everywhere. People haven't the palest idea of the work you're doing, your background, your experience. You're not the one, in this case, that you're providing with the actual certified patent, that, you know, and the actual degree that you're a doctor, all this stuff. But the what's the point if I'm actually giving a substantial amount of it? That's the problem I have with this guy. The only one. It's more like a doubt, like saying, You're suspicious because I don't quote stuff. I'm suspicious because you're actually pretending me to quote stuff given what I'm actually doing on YouTube. Right? I don't understand what's the ultimate purpose, right? To be an authentic source or whatever. You just admit that basically you cannot understand which sources I'm using through the thing. You don't even start criticizing it. So what's the point of it all? It's a take on it, alright. But I say this, I admit it, because I think that if there was more criticism, I would be more, you know, people would watch my content more, and that's also a strategy, by the way, to capture views. But again, I'm kidding. I'm not really accusing the person of wanting to be that, say, malicious towards me. I just really don't understand the entire point of being an authentic source, whatever that is supposed to mean. And I'm a story, right? So in this context, I see within a spectrum of possibilities that is really infinite. And so I like also to roam in this universe, saying what kind of moral forces are agitating themselves behind the screen. To produce this thing. And then but coming back to the guy who was asking me about Carpathian history, says he certainly seems very knowledgeable, and I wouldn't doubt that he has an academic background, but the fact that he doesn't cite sources is frustrating, and his videos are largely unscripted, which leads to a sort of rambling style. Yeah, that's true. I often ramble like this videos, and I often try to draw a moral lesson from the whole thing, right? When I study history, the entire point, again, that I'm trained for is to express, finally, a historical judgment, right? What I was formed like as a historian, and what I think I always was interested in to get to the ultimate deal was, you know, I got this info. Well, it may not even be perfectly complete or the entire reality, because guess what? You know, with history, everything is subject to that kind of criticism to some point, to some degree, and you can always find something to criticize in somebody else's historical interpretation. But what really is important is the historical judgment that you actually give, right? And I know there are lots of people out there who think that historians shouldn't judge politically, morally, but that's the entire point of history. Like, what do you think we study history for? For understanding? And then what do you do with understanding? Right? I'm not talking about this discussion specifically, that doesn't touch on that, but it's easy, at least, to find enormous misconceptions, basically across the entire the entire media about history, to a disgusting level. And I think that what I do is slightly better. At least I have this suspect about myself, like maybe I'm a narcissist, or maybe I'm an actually competent person, or maybe both, right? And I see the moral and scientific degeneration of our world, and the fact of not citing sources on a YouTube channel doesn't seem to me the worst thing in that scale of disaster. So yes, I will say this is about the frustration regarding the fact that I don't cite sources. It's understandable, but every time I make these videos, I want you, first of all, to toy with the idea that I'm providing you with, right? And you may reasonably doubt of whatever, right? But it's the fact that you're getting that is going to change your life, because everything does, right? So I will not digress on the entire reason why I'm here, but to be very to the point, I believe that rather than making people paranoid, fearful, and distrustful about anyone, right, just because they will not understand in any case how to quote, right, that comes with a lot of practice to do it well. You can't imagine what it is even to criticize a scholarly work of experts or whatever. That's something that you build only with your own personal experience. So rather than cosplaying an alleged expert, like the many that are there on YouTube that will cite every single thing at a step of the way, but will ultimately not put together anything out of it, still make incredibly asinine and superficial pseudo-criticism of whatever they think reality works like they want. I think that Asai Soren does his job, his work outside of YouTube, but also gets from his own content by making it some important fuel for that, which is also a reason why I make this content. It's better to acquaint people to the next stage, to the stage that makes them aware of the fact that history, first of all, is much more complex than learning how to cite, right, correctly, because it really is, right? And it may be that, of course, if you don't do it, you will narrow it down to something that is even less than that complexity, but you will not stop to the empty mechanism, which is at the end of the day what they will remain with. They would remain with, and abstractly and or theoretically, because they're not going to quote sources as a homework because I tell them to do it, so they will not learn how to understand history. And therefore, I think that what really matters, if more people are listening to you, are the insights, right, on the actual historical issues. And especially if you make 1800 videos that also come back often on the same topics, eviscerate them, talk about in depth different aspects, etc. Not just you will build up some sort of personal culture, which, you know, is something I keep myself for myself as far as I'm concerned, but I'm in this sense rendering other, you know, participants in. But in fact, I will help people getting acquainted with the enormity of history, and yet the fact that this history can be confidently learned, right? I must say this, that all the people who are still struggling to seek for sources for understanding where the guy gets the source, the information from, this whole thing, are also the people who basically are admitting, as they often do when they talk history, that they still haven't understood much about history. And I'm very honest about this. I mean, there are some quite so-called historians out here that still make videos like, what is history? Well, some people think this, some people think that, and we don't really know. I'm a person who just from the beginning, instead, reasons like, I want to know something, I want to sort it out, and I want to provide myself first of all, and then the others, because I think that that's qualitative as it works morally and scientifically with the actual explanation of what that thing practically is. And fuck moral relativism. I want to find the answer, and I will have this idea, and I will defend it, and I will base it, I will found it. This aspect of my videos here didn't emerge, is that the reason why I talk so long is because I actually provide with information. It's not like other channels. There are 3 types of channels nowadays. The first one is the guy was, again, paranoid about citing everything, and then comes up with, but I'm a historical materialist, so that's how I interpret history. Well, good luck with that. Secondly, there is the sort of long documentaries, just like a story, essentially. Let's see what, I don't know, medieval England was about. Look, there was this peasant did this, and look, there is a source that says that this peasant did this at this point, and then there was this other that washed, the clothes, and it lasts 2 hours. It basically gets nowhere in terms of quality or in-depth analysis or political, institutional, military history, because that is too complex, because we live in a world of forecastators, and of course nobody wants to hear that they're not handling the most important, capable of handling or understanding the most difficult and important things, also in the present, not just in history. And I personally don't treat my audience like this, because that is actually the only thing I'm interested in. And then there is the type of sort of cartoon like video that wants to explain you, I don't know, the Roman manipular reforms in 12 minutes. As if a person who doesn't know anything about that, by listening to it, would have this deep political, military, or social understanding of why that actually happened. And very often the dialectical way these videos are sort of laid out are pathetic. They are full of cliches. They're surely scripted by people who have no idea of what this thing is, or they just want to make quick money. And or by people who will, like me, that would watch this 12-minute videos for 3 minutes and will say, this is rubbish, and I don't want to even watch it. But surprisingly enough, the most watched content is the latter, right? Because people essentially think that history is a video game. And as it is simple to, to explain history, should be also simple to source it, because, it's easier, right? There are just this couple of sources, couple of scholars, you quote them, you cite them, and so everything is going to be fine. It's going to be real history, right? The guy is going to be, competent about that, right? Here, as we've seen, the discussion invokes peer reviewing, right? Good luck with, whoever makes that for a living, with peer reviewing YouTube videos. I don't know, it makes me laugh. Maybe it is really a thing, but I don't know. In my world, it does not exist, right? Peer reviewing is serious stuff. For how do you even quote stuff on a YouTube video? Like, it's very weird. Like, if I have to quote, I don't know, you should make a video of, I don't know, 6 hours long just to quote everything. I quote normally in a 30 pages article, I don't know, multiple hundreds of times, or cite at least. And yeah, how do you do that on YouTube? Like, there can be other disciplines, maybe journalism, whatever. But I don't know. I think there is a greater sense of better. I don't define what it is, right? Then there is me, who tries instead to make sense of things, to be insightful, and to put at disposal whatever I have, and not bragging excessively about my background. But I think, just also as the follower here noticed, that likely just by listening to me you can understand that I maybe have some little historical background, right? And that's the point, right? Then if anybody has thought that I was using the YouTube to pretend that I should be source. Well, this is not really the case, and they should listen to my videos because that's also my work, and I'm pretty open actually about the content, the sources, whenever I see it like something that can be useful in function of what I'm talking about, right? I don't know, the other day I made, what was that video about? The Byzantine tributary system. There are beautiful work, I don't know, Halden wrote something about it. There is really a lot, right? And of course it is changing over time. But the essential is fundamentally what I lay there out, right? For example, that scholar is a materialist. It's just uses Marxist method in interpretation. I trash that not because I have, of course, I believe it's scientifically wrong, right? But because I explain you why it is scientifically wrong, and or actually will not tell you what Halden says when I can explain it by myself as a historian who actually doesn't have to prove anything to anyone, because that's what pertains to the other life outside YouTube, and I don't really owe it to anyone. It can't backfire for the channel, does it? Right? I don't think so. I think that what backfires for the channel is not using the silly animations and the shorter pre-made scripts with chip information. That's what I learned from YouTube. But I put history above, and especially my personal historical growth before, because that's also what I actually do in my life, and so I don't care really about most of what goes on here, even if the channel suffers from it. Right? So I think that this does explain what the whole thing is really about. I think that again, you can always, for example, there are people who ask about different. I rarely am asked about the sources, interestingly enough, but right, that's the kind of comment I would normally answer in a video. But if I make like a video like Louis XVI and saying I use stuff from it everywhere, it's something I go by memory because it's a concept. It's not like a word that I have to quote specifically. I don't even know. Say I can at the moment I can't even remember the name of it, and I'm not going to spend the time to add it later. For people that still largely don't know what to do with that, especially if they already have an entire library and they could find it by themselves, right? So it may sound rude, but I think it's fair. I consider myself stern but fair in these things, and so even if it may not be fair, again, that I surely float on an enormous pile of information that I evidently, make a synthesis of in an original way, I think I can go on without problem, and of course providing with the actual sources whenever I see fit, if it is useful for explaining that specific situation. But most of the historical criticism that really revolves around actual historical criticism in a scientific way is not much which source you use, but I don't know, among scholars mostly talk about how do you interpret that and why. And we're talking about macroscopic issues, and or at least important ones politically, that you don't need to source in order to be speaking of them, right? So if this is what we can do as doctors among ourselves, I think that there's surely someone who can simply be interested into it without having to listen to names of sources and authors that they're not going to read anyway, right? So that's simple as it goes, and the mere curiosity they can trigger through such content, I think, is the fuel that can bring lots of people to actually pick a book on their own and start in it and finding the answers by themselves. Right? I know of people who contact me and said, I began to study at university because of Schwerpunkt, thank you for that, etc. While there are people who literally ask, have you made this ever a video on this topic? Well, there is a search function on the channel. Why don't you use it? Right? We arrived to the point that you have to ask for somebody to indicate it to you. Right? So let's be fair. Let's be balanced, and especially let's be confident. Right? If you really want to go for historical criticism, go on, take on, attack, aggress. That's the way to go. Right? But just sort of, having suspicion about this sort of, why doesn't he source? Like, this thing, does he really know? His supposed knowledge, is it really there? Whatever. That sounds slightly creepy, I think. And while I understand what's behind that, in a fair sense, I also still see it taking a sort of inclination which doesn't leave the benefit of the doubt for something that is not even, in fact, evidence or researched in a way that you can actually say, well, this is not good, just per se, or that doesn't take in consideration the actual context. And basically all I've said in this video and everything that I've said in any other, all the rest, let's say, are the ones that I uploaded. Right? That's where I prove things. For the rest, I don't have to. And this is the beauty of this place. In any case, for today, I stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. As always, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time.